So, can the level of development of the prefrontal cortex be used to determine the standard in case of juvenile violent crime? So, why my focus on this topic is start with when I'm preparing my debate on juvenile delinquency last year. So, I realized that there was a strong correlations between the impulsive behavior among the teenagers and the rising crimes among this group. So while I was digging in more about the correlations, I found one example of the conflict between the policies and the science. So in Johnson versus Mississippi's case, the Supreme Court reversed that the court's deeply anti-science decisions written by the justice. The new ruling says that what you do in the early teens determine how you will behave for the rest of your life. So the courts permit a life without a parole sentence for 15-year-old defendant. It seems everyone knows that the hormones are largely responsible for impulsive adolescent behavior, and we have largely ignored that how neuroscience implications for the impulsive adolescent behavior. So, while many countries have integrated the juvenile justice system and adult justice system, the line between teens and adults is blurred. So here's a quote. So how does neuroscience affect the juvenile delinquency? The first one is neuroimaging study. Through the window into the brain, the neuroscientists have learned that the adolescents mature at significantly different rates. So the graph below kind of illustrates that is adolescents' high vulnerability to reward that drive risk-taking behavior, contrary to the long-held belief that adolescents are unable to measure risk. As you can see the graph below, from age 5 to age 20, the adolescence was kind of in the middle of the changing process. So the green side is actually about the dynamic mapping for human cortical development, which brings another important point in my study, the prefrontal cortex. So what is prefrontal cortex? As the graph shows below, the pink side, the side over here, that's the prefrontal cortex. So how that important to juvenile and even to juvenile delinquency? So this part controls the reasoning and help us to think before we act. So this one also always develop later. So this part of the brain is still changing and is well developed into adulthood. With our prefrontal cortex, an important part of the brain that regulates impulsive behavior and the rational judgment. So we can not only foresee the future, but plan for it and consider the consequences of bad decisions. A particular group of neurons of prefrontal cortex is critical in inhibiting other cells that regulate the behavior. And these inhibitory cells don't approach adult mode of activities until late adolescence, just like the graph shows in above. So the development of PFC its local structure and the input and output connectivity largely follows the same maturational steps in humans and also mice. So it is initially guided by molecular cues. Those important decline with the age, while the prevalence of electrical activities increases throughout the development. So according to the study up there, I did a survey for Williston students for particularly 9th grade and 11th grader. So whether the impulsivity in 9th and 11th graders able to offer a cue about their level of PFC, which is prefrontal cortex development. So here is my survey. I have 26 questions in total on this survey, and I summarized them to 6 columns just for the clear. First is adrenaline-seeking behavior, plan ahead, negative mood, racing thoughts, and behavior and controlled behavior. So here comes to the survey for 9th graders. So I sent out this survey to 60 students, I was listening in total, and 30 copies for each grade. So there is the bar chart that I made for 9th grader survey results. And then y-axis shows like the percentage, and then x-axis is those like 6 columns. So on this bar chart, I think it can clearly be seen from the chart that girls in 9th grade are more inclined to choose the racing thoughts and the adrenaline-seeking behavior. And their choices are more absolute. They tend to choose a gray and a disagree instead of a gray sum and disagree sum for every single question. So at the same time, in the negative mood options, the ninth grade girls were divided into two opposites. 29% of them choose to agree, and 25% of them choose to disagree. And then here is the survey for the bar chart for 11th graders. The choice of 11th grade girls seem to be very hesitant. They tend to choose more about agree some and disagree some compared to the 9th graders. So in most of the questions, girl in 11th grade, they choose agree some, disagree some, and then among them, the options of controlled behavior, the number of the girls in grade 11 who choose agreement reached to 57.79%, which is really high compared to 9th grade girls. Absolutely. So we can clearly see from the proportion of impulsive emotions in 9th graders and 11th graders. For the first category, adult seeking behavior, I include question 22, 24, and 17. For those questions about extreme sport, and the agree rate of 9th graders is really high. It's 34%. But the agree rate of grade 11 is less than 25%. In addition, there is a very obvious difference between grade 9 and grade 11 according to the controlled behavior, as I mentioned above. So in the bar chart, the disagree rate of controlled behavior in 9th grade reached to 43.23%, and the agree rate to 11th grade reached to 57.29%. So this data clearly shows that the younger adolescents are obviously more inclined to tend to make extreme behaviors and more likely to be impulsive. So while the girls in 11th grade consider more advanced and more ahead, more logically, so more than half of the girls believe that controlling their behavior is a really important thing. So other scientific group, including American Association for the Advancement of Science, are examining juvenile justice through their existing lens of brain science. A recent report by National Research Council, part of the National Academy of Science, is reforming adolescent justice, compiled all recent studies to advance the developmental agenda of juvenile justice in the future. And over the past 2 decades, the law of juvenile sentencing has changed significantly. The Supreme Court, primed by research that shows the brain of juveniles are not fully developed and that they likely to lack impulsive control, has issued a half dozen opinions holding that juveniles are less culpable than adults for their act. So as the court has also ruled that some of the harshness punishment for acts committed by the children are unconstitutionally cruel and unusual punishments. Thank you. Is there questions?
For Kiko? Kiko? The surveys you did for the 9th and 11th graders, those are only for the females?
Yeah, that's all for the only ones.
Can you talk about why you decided to do that?
Yeah, because I asked my friends to hand in the survey actually in EMV and World Health. So EMV I handed in person, but World Health I asked one of my friends to hand it in. It's really hard for me to ask a friend maybe from 4 to hand in the survey, so it's kind of hard for me to do it. So I just used the female in total. Yeah.
What does controlled behaviors mean? Does that mean that they feel like they are able to control impulses? Is that what that means?
Yeah, so controlled behavior, it's actually related to some questions on my survey. It's something like after I did something like maybe impulsive behavior, I tend to control myself. Like if I feel really bad, I have a negative mood today, I tend to control my behavior instead of like make everything messy or something like this. So that's related to, I think, 4 questions on my survey. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any further analyses planned of your survey results?
Yeah. So right now I just barely separate them to 6 columns, but after I watched Tegan's present. I think like her way to analyze the survey is really great. Also, I probably gonna divide it to maybe 4 or 5 questions, and I gonna like kind of gathering the data in total. That gonna analyze like with more details. So yeah. Alright.
If you had to make a policy change, what would it be?
So so currently I think there's 2 justice systems, one of the juvenile justice system and then adult justice system. So that's, I think the juvenile who commit violent crime, they need a more specific line to divide like which part is actually juvenile, which part is actually adult. I know that sounds really confusing, but we can't simply divide the juvenile and adult just because you're 19 years old and you're 18 years old, but your brain is actually different. So that's why I think we have to like engage more with neuroscience to determine where is the clear line. Maybe not a clear line, but maybe just let the neuroscience engage more in their brain. So that's what I think, basically policy change. Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Well, thank you, Kiko.
Thank you.